Welcome to what is the first of hopefully many Digimon deck profiles. I really just have been enjoying this game. After quitting Vanguard, it was kind of hard to find like a niche and to get into something that I could devote a little bit of my extra time to when I wasn't doing something else. And this is a nice game to settle on. I've been a big fan of Digimon for a while, and it really was kind of hard to find something to vent that into. I mean, there was like the show and a couple games, but really there was nothing that actually had like a lot of flavor that could be, brought out like a card game can, provide. And it was nice to finally get that. So within the game, I have tried out, I think, pretty much all the colors at this point, and I enjoy them all to an extent. I think all of them are pretty nice, and obviously green has the bugs, and the bugs are where I have sort of gravitated towards, but black also really, really got my attention because, as of right now anyway, it has a very interesting playstyle. It's very based around, like, sabotaging your opponent, bolstering a defense, and kind of wearing them down rather than having, like, a big ending play. And it's something I really appreciate. I really enjoyed how this deck works so far, and I think that there is a lot of potential to it. I'm not really super into any of the stuff that comes out so far in future sets. There is a Machine Dramon card coming out in the trial deck, and that is something I definitely want to build because Machine Dramon is like the entire reason why I like black. It's my favorite like non-bug Digimon. And yeah, so without a lot of extra delay, let's go ahead and get into the deck profile because I can ramble. But this deck starts out with 4 of the level 2 Kapurimon. This is your main, like, I don't know how it's starter, but like your main Digitama. If the Digimon has Reboot, which is one of the 2, kind of 3-ish mechanics that it's based around, those ones being Reboot, Blocker, and De-Digivolution. Reboot is the ability to sit back up during the start of your opponent's turn, and then Blocker is the ability to block if you're unsuspended, untapped, whatever you want to call it. And Digivolution I'll talk a bit about later. But yeah, if you have the main component here, the inheritable is to gain an extra 1,000. It just is nice to have. And then the 5th one is just the one Tsunamon. Funny enough, so usually this 5th spot belongs to something that you just throw in there for the sake of it. This is something I've debated on running 2 of, just because Reboot is less heavily focused on with this build. It is the blocker, like War Greymon-ish build, but I took it in a very different direction because of how the deck was sort of balanced out. This card is, if you have a Digimon on the field with the same name as whatever this is under, this Digimon will gain 2,000 extra. That inheritable is really nice because you work with blockers so much that having them go up anyway is always very beneficial. I've debated on running 2 of these, but I don't really know how I feel about running the 2-3 split right now. I just haven't played the game enough to know if that's really advantageous. I've kind of heard both mixed things from it, so I do plan on testing that, and if you have the ability to test out 2 of these, I think it'd be pretty great. But yeah, this deck goes wide rather than going tall, so something like this actually really helps out quite a bit. And for the level 3s, we got your 4 Agurumon. Simply enough, this is just your 2-drop. Making sure the camera's still recording. Yeah, we're good. This is just your normal 2-drop. Every deck appreciates these. Every deck uses them basically the same. It's just a free, guilt-free way into making sure that you're going up the ladder and expanding your field without paying a lot of memory. So always got those. And then right alongside him, we got 4 Gotsumon. This is a blocker rookie that has the ability that if it wants to attack, you have to pay 2 memory. Very simple. Normally, most of the time, I think this goes towards champions or level 4s. They downed it for this guy here because this deck is blocker heavy, so they mixed it up a little bit. This card's always just good. Just filling out the field with these. Not something you really want to, like, Evo into normally. If you got, like, this guy going on here, then putting one of these over him and then playing out another one is always nice. However, don't have to do that. Really, these guys are just just there to be out in abundance to stop things like Rookie Rush and just overextending, just stop the big guys with something that's very little and inconsequential if he's being, if he's killed. And then you got 4 of the Toy Agumon, which is like the best one out of the lot. Anything this is under will inherit Reboot. And Reboot, again, is the ability that if the Digimon, for whatever reason, is resting or suspended during your opponent's beginning phase, it'll unsuspend, it'll untap itself. This is really good because obviously you can attack things, set it back up, attack, set it back up. You don't have to worry about it being in any danger, as well as re-enabling the blocker ability so your blockers can still be aggressive and defensive at the same time. Kind of splitting the offense-defense thing very 50-50, I felt like 60-40 in the way of defense a little bit. And that's sort of the thing, is that this deck doesn't have a beginning. This deck has a beginning and a middle, but no end. And it's things like this that sort of let you stay in the middle without having to overextend into like a later game because of how heavy this deck is. And we're going to talk a bit more about that as the deck profile goes on. However, just keep in mind, Toyagumon is like best boy, best bae. We love him. And then the 14th, the last one, is our 2 Chumon. So, I've seen people run Caramon, I think is his name, the inheritable, if you play Digimon with the same name, draw a card. The card is also very good. I just didn't like it when compared to Chumon, who can actually outright disable a few abilities. So looking at the landscape of what we have, certain colors can have very like cheeky memory gain abilities. Chumon is the ability where if he's on the board, you can prevent your opponent from gaining memory outside of Tamers. And this is really, really solid because it just helps cut off a few different things. Like, for instance, a few decks can utilize the gain 3 to give back 3 abilities. I mean, if you're playing blue, their Hammer Sparks are completely disabled. Red can utilize the Metal Greymon that will have them gain 3 if they crash into something. So on and so forth. I mean, yellow has a really good system for that. Green has a really good system for that. There just are a lot of colors right now that can utilize that plenty. I mean, purple can even utilize that really well. And so it's things like this that really, really, really help because of how annoying and how aggressive those cards can be to gain so many resources over you. Again, this deck is very, very slow. And so to make that sort of evened out, you do really want to point this deck more towards like a sabotage, bringing you down to my level kind of deal. Rather than like beating over them. And Chumon just really helps with that. You can run Caramon if you'd like. The extra draw is nice, but I feel like it's less practical than something like this. Again, though, it's player preference. I don't think there's really a wrong answer. I just think it's whatever you're more comfortable with. Moving on to level 4s, though. We got 4 of your boy Numamon. 3 cost, it's 1 to Evo, but 3 to just hardcast it. Again, this deck just wants to expand. It wants to go wide rather than go tall. Going tall is too dangerous for this deck. It is very, very susceptible to removal if you try to go with the, intended route of it. And so things like this just really help out with that. And of course, he's 1 to Evo, so he's just a cheap, turbo into your ultimates. Then we got 4 Gardramon. He is a blocker that can't attack, but he has 7k DP. That is amazing. This is, again, where I talk about how you can just play something, sit on it, and its existence alone is going to be enough to make sure that your game is progressing normally. And again, just having these blockers just sort of amass and then playing them out is always going to be good. 7k stops most early to mid-game level threats. And then, of course, if you have something like, Sunamon underneath it, this can make him 9k. It's always appreciated, always good to have. I love Gardramon. I wish you could attack, but obviously beggars can't be choosers. It'd be a little dorky if you could do that. But to end off the champion route, we've got your 4 Greymon, for Black Greymon, whatever. It has the inheritable. If the Digimon has Reboot, it also gains Jamming. This is your progression to your best stack. Reboot, Jamming, extra security attack. That is your big not incline, but your big build. Of course, like I said, we are avoiding that. So what this does is it combos really well from the ultimates. We'll talk a bit about that later, but basically, as quick as you can put it, jamming is just always going to be good and always going to be useful. All right, so on to the level 5s, or the ultimates. We've got 4 Andromon, and we're actually just going to talk a bit about these guys together because they kind of do the same thing. And we have 4 Metal Greymon. So these are actually pretty much where all of your games start to float around towards. Andromon is just a blocker. Straight and simple, he's just a blocker. But Metal Greymon is a reboot. Rebooter. Metal Greymon has reboot himself without needing inheritables. But he also has the inherited ability where if the Digimon has reboot, it gains security attack +1. So we'll talk a bit about that later because it varies in use, but both of these guys are able to achieve kind of the same thing. This is a blocker that if it inherits Reboot, you can swing with, sit back up during the next turn. Swing with, sit back up. And that will allow it to be both offensive and defensive, again, shifting it kind of down the middle and allowing you to stay very safe. Now, if you haven't noticed, every one of these Evos is going to be 3. There are, as of right now, there are no 2-drop Evos in the Ultimate lineup as far as Ultimates go. I think they actually just got one in the new set, but that's very far down the line for us. Things like this are where your games kind of float around. You have one of the Ichis in the field, you swing with it, sit it back up, swing with it, sit it back up. Same thing with this, you swing, sit it back up, swing, sit it back up. This is more to be less defensive, but just to keep it out of harm's way, so your opponent has to use like removal to get rid of it. Otherwise, you can, try to Evo it up if you really want to. However, giving these, using something like a Greymon, of course, to also give it jamming is also pretty fantastic. The other thing is that with this stack alone, you don't have to have any other extra, additions to it. You can evolve this over a Hagurumon and then Evo into this, and you have an amazing stack that you can float on pretty much the entire game. Now, your opponent having bigger blockers is going to be an issue, but that's not something you're going to run into too often, unless you're in the mirror match. However, just being able to sit here and just pick and pick and pick is your ideal strategy, because everything from here up is really, really bulky, and there's nothing that Black has right now that is going to get rid of their issue of removal being so heavily damaging to this deck's playstyle, because everything costs so much and is so heavy in terms of evoing and what it does and everything. Now Craniumon helps that in the next set, however we don't have that right now, so we're going with this. I might flow back around these a little bit later, but keep in mind that this is kind of where your game tends to stay. There is that 9K that you can run. I didn't like it very much. I felt like it required too much setup to basically do the same thing. However, these guys are also pretty fantastic. They've done very well so far, and I love them. Off to the Megas! We've got a single War Greymon, and again, if you go too hard down the War Greymon line, this deck becomes insanely susceptible to removal. You build this guy up, you're paying 3 memory to Evo into this, then 3 to Evo into this, which is basically, on average, going to cost you about 2 turns, 2 turns, if you're not, depending if you even have, your Tamer out. And so, because of that, I've really, really watered down how much War Greymon I tended to use in this deck. War Greymon is, kind of to a fault almost, the perfect card for this deck, but that's very much in design and just his the way that he is made to work and made to flow with this. He just simply enough has Reboot and Blocker. Very simple, because you can just outright play him and he has the perfect package. He has everything you need. He's an 11k blocker, which is super cool. But whenever it comes to that, you Evo up into this. You've gone from whatever Greymon to Metal Greymon to this. This guy getting Gaia Force, Cocytus, Breath, 7 stars, 7 heavens, anything that can possibly kill this guy will immediately set you back so far. This deck is just not designed to go tall. The deck can go tall, but if you try to go tall with it, it is so detrimental to how this deck plays, and so it just very much highlights how slow and bulky this deck can be. So I only went with the 1 because I only really want to go into it if I can. Ideally, he's going to be a Reboot blocker with jamming and security attack +1 if you have the perfect stack going on. That is phenomenal. That's great if you can get it. However, that is if your opponent lets him stick around long enough to cause damage, because if not, it's going to be a horrible day for you, because then you're going to have to recoup and try again, and that is just not something this deck is going to be able to do. There's no external memory gaining. There's no way to try to lessen these costs. It is just a very hardcore, very costly deck that can absolutely kill you if you are not careful. So along him, he has a partner in crime, which is, I have 2 Machine Dramon. I would love to run a third one, I just don't have the room for it. Machine Dramon is really a card that I run with rose-tinted goggles. He's pretty flawed, but I do personally love him and think he's an amazing little boy. I don't know what to call him. Also just one of my favorite non-bug Digimon. He has blocker, just generically has blocker. He has 40 Evo into. However, he has a hard cast ability where if you play him for the 12 hard cast cost, he will de-digivolve 2 of your opponent's Digimon by 2. This is a nice retort to Omnimon. If they go and they hand you 6 or whatever else, handing it right back to them and then playing this out and then de-digivolving 2 things is a really, really nice rebuttal. There are better hard casts that can probably go into this, but really I run 2 just on the merit of, 1, I do feel like he is very good for this deck because bringing your opponent down on your level and then being able to beat over them with things like this without a lot of threat is very nice. But also the matter of fact is that if you absolutely have to, for 1 extra memory, you can start to progress into a tall setup like you would with War Greymon. However, I don't recommend doing that, and I'm never really in a position where I have to. I do very much use this guy for his intended purpose of just, hey, you gave me, you Gaia forced me, great, I'm going to use that big chunk of memory you gave me, throw it right back at you, and I'm going to de-digivolve 2 of your things. I love that. I think he's fantastic. I think he's really good for this deck. I wouldn't run any more than that. Like I said, 3 is something that I've floated around, but at the same time, I think if I had extra room to run another Mega Blaster, another hardcast card like this, it would probably be something a little more along the line of like Puppetmon. However, I love Machine Dramon. I think he's fantastic. If you don't want to run him, any other Mega Blast card, I keep saying that, any other hardcast card is pretty much just as useful and just as gonna be just as good. This one just has the flavor of black to it, and then you can Evo into it. With a Toy Agumon under the stack, it can become the same stack as War Greymon. It's just not quite as good. It's a little bit more maintenance because it costs that 4 memory, and that can really suck. And then we've got 3 Hyandramon. This is just a nice cheap mega to go into. Now this can pretty much take the place of like your Toy Agumon stacks. This is cheap, which is why we can afford to run 3 of these, because they do lessen that cost by being a 2-drop rather than 3. And, inheriting all the good stuff, hey, if you've been sitting on Metal Greymon for a while and it has a Toy Agumon stack underneath it, I'm yawning. Okay. Has a Toy Agumon underneath it. You can play this and get reboots and get jamming and all that good stuff. And you can do it without a lot of, repercussions to it. It's not as expensive. However, again, it does kind of fall into that same camp of, removal can really screw you over, but for a little less of a cost. And then to wrap up the Megas entirely, or the level 6s anyway, entirely, we have 2 Volcanodramon. This card is just extremely meta-relevant right now. Again, this deck is very slow, so very quick pace, rush decks are going to be your biggest enemy, and something like this obviously very much helps out a lot with that. Not just because of that, but he also has security attack +2, and he does it without a lot of extra accommodations needing to be met with it. But being able to nuke the field of rookies and then play this and start attacking for 2 is pretty fantastic. I joined a free tournaments a couple weeks back, and it was, there's no prizes or anything. It was just people getting together, and I won. I had 6 games. I won 5 of them, losing the 6th round to Blue Omnimon Turbo, and this card helped out in a lot of the scenarios because when in doubt, if you're keeping your opponent from going tall, they're going to go wide, and this can help with that. But then also he just has he has +1 security attack, which means that he does something that this deck does not do. And that is be aggressive, and so that makes it really fun to just be able to play something like this and also have a little bit more aggression as part of the package. But very good lineup. I haven't really regretted anything about this lineup. Again, part of me wants to run another Mega Blaster. I've also kind of debated on running Magnetramon, I think it's his name, the yellow one that has you gain back 2 memory, but I was having a harder time getting that one to work. Also, Puppetmon kind of has more priority. I was thinking about taking out Hyandramon just because of the way this deck is built, but didn't feel like it was very appropriate. I feel like, when does come a time to go tall with this deck, I'd rather go with this than anything else, just because of how cheap he is. So that's really up for you to decide. If there's anything in this deck you disagree with, again, a lot of this is player preference, so you don't have to worry about, really too many wrong answers. It's really just more about what helps you play more efficiently, personally as a player, because of how you are comfortable. And that's a really good thing about Digimon right now anyway, is that Digimon, as of right now and as of the future sets that we can see, there is a defined meta, but there's also a really good variety of relevancy, and a lot of it seems to be based on like personal preference of players, and I really enjoy that. So you know, if you do question something and in my explanation just isn't quite cutting it for you, fantastic. That means that you are obviously seeing it from a different angle, and it's totally okay. Ending off the Digimon count, we have 2 Millenniumon. This is your big boy. Now, what this card does is when it enters the board, send a Digimon to the bottom of your opponent's deck. And if this Digimon happens to die, you can, and it has a stack underneath it, you can revive it without a stack. Really nice. I love this card. However, the only reason why I'm running it 2 is 1, space. And the second thing being that I don't go into this card very often. You really only go into it if you have, like, Hyandramon out or something. Like, obviously, if I've gone and hard casted a Machine Dramon, did something like that, and then while my opponent is recovering, I get my turn back again, I go ahead and go into this. This card is fantastic. It's just not a finisher. It's not a boss monster, and it's not really a finisher. Under like a really perfectly built stack, if your opponent lets you get that far, you can absolutely turn this guy into a rebooting, you know, +1 security attack, jamming mess of a card that doesn't like to be removed. But even then, like, if you do that, it's not really... It's super impractical to bench on something like that, especially with this deck being so slow. Like, I guess you could turbo into Millenniumon, but, like, you know, what makes Omnimod worth turboing into is that he removes and then he attacks twice, and then he adds the Mega back to your hand. This card just comes out, sends something away, and then is, like, annoying to get rid of. But that's not going to, like, end the game for you. Your opponent can definitely play around that. If your opponent's still going faster than you are, like, it's not going to matter at all. And Millenniumon, just to me, he's a very cute card, and I like him a lot, but I definitely didn't think he was worth, like, maxing out or running any more than, like, 2, but... He's cute. I like him a lot. I mean, he's one of my favorite Digimon. Like, to be honest, I mean, it's, you know, Chimeramon, which is already a favorite of mine, who also is sporting the head of Kabuterimon, which is also a favorite of mine, but then is surrounded by Machine Dramon energy, is just, ugh, I love him. He's a beautiful boy. But yeah, I just couldn't justify running any more than him. But that's it for the main Digimon count. Off to the options and tamers. Let's go for the easy one here. We're running 3 Tai. I've seen people run less. That's totally fine if you'd like to. I've debated on putting this down to 2. However, I just feel like it's pretty decent in what it does. What Tai does is you can play him to obviously fix your memory to 3 every turn if it's less than, but you can also have, during your opponent's turn, all of your black Digimon gain 1000 DP. This is really nice because it puts your Digimon just kind of over that hump of being easy to get around and then being really annoying. Now, this works on everything, but obviously we're focusing on like Machine Dramon, Guard Dramon, all that stuff, Gotsumon. Getting him up to an extra boost is always going to be really nice. I really should go take a nap. It's always really nice. Getting 2 of these on the board is just absolutely phenomenal. Not practical, but phenomenal if you can get it off. Not much to say here. It's just a bolster to your defenses. I'm kind of thinking about taking out 1. I think if this next set wasn't so close behind, I would probably do a little more modding to it and take this out for something like a Puppetmon, but I don't know. 3's never really led me the wrong way. I don't dislike 3, so I haven't really seen a need to take it out. However, I do understand the reasoning behind people that do want to like remove these and run like 1 or 2. Because at the end of the day, it's not like yellows or yellow like lets you fix your hand in your security, or red lets you gain security attack. Like, it doesn't flow quite as hardcore, and that can really suck sometimes, but I think it's pretty phenomenal. And then last to end off the deck, we have 3 Spider Shooters. So let's talk about this opposed to the other 2 options. So what Spider Shooter does is a 3 cost where you can choose a Digimon on the field and de-digivolve it by 1. So very simple and straight to the point. However, there is an extreme and then there's like a median option, right? The extreme option is a 6-drop card called Infinity Cannon. Infinity Cannon is pay 6 memory to de-digivolve a Digimon by 2. Very quickly, and because it's the easiest to get out there, I don't run that card simply because it costs way too much to do way too little. 2 Digivolutions is fine, but when you have something like Machine Dramon, which is, yeah, it's a hard cast, but you're doing that to put a blocker on board and just a body in general, and de-digivolve not 1 Digimon, but 2 by 2. That is way more than what Infinity Cannon does, where it just picks one target, and basically for a guaranteed memory, guaranteed 3 to your opponent, if not more, you are jacking down one Digimon by 2, which is in that scenario way too easy to recover from. Just not my thing. It's nice when it flips in the security, but that's benching off way too much of a chance. The cards that are only good as security flips, like those oh, you gain 3k, but if it's in the security, you'll draw 2, like whatever those ones are. I think every color has one, if I'm not mistaken, or at least most. Those just are not good to me because the crappy ability does not warrant the good security ability that's like only useful when it randomly goes off. Just is not something I really want to use. This is just as good in the security. It does just as much. It can still stop, like, if you attack, if the War Greymon is hitting me for like 4 or 5 security and this comes out on the second one, that's it. It still stops a train. However, there is another option that I do see people playing, and that is a card called Looking Back on the Good Times. That is a 4-drop card that de-digivolves them by 1, and then I think if they're level 4 or lower, it kills them. That card is really nice on paper, but when you look at the fact that it is a 4-drop, it puts you into the scenario where in most cases, most practical cases, because when you look at it, on average, you're only guaranteed about 3 memory per turn. There are obviously other scenarios, but the most practical thing to look at is that you're going to have your Digimon fixer, your tamer on the board, and your memory will be fixed to 3. That's how I look at every single card. It's how useful will it be when my turn starts and I hit 3. Everything else is a little more like jumbled because you don't know what's going to happen from there on. But how's it going to look on that part? And a card that is guaranteed in almost every practical situation without my opponent being generous or being foolish is going to end my turn to maybe kill something, but then to maybe lessen their Digimon is just not good to me. It's just not something that I feel like is a solid card. It's good, again, in security, but we're back to where Infinity Cannon was, where, yeah, it's good in security, but I don't want to run a card that's good on an off chance that it comes up in a certain spot, rather than it being just okay across the board. I'm playing it safe and playing a very good, just middle of the road card that doesn't require a lot of maintenance, doesn't require a lot of what ifs, that just does what it does and nothing more on both ends, rather than a card that, really 2 cards really, that are kind of okay in different, that are like neato in different situations, but only really good in like others. Again, like the card killing things, like, yeah, you can kill like a blocker with it. That's nice, but again, it's just, I don't like guaranteeing that I'm handing my opponent back their turn for the use of like 1 card. It just isn't something that I am comfortable with. And again, if your comfort level is something like that, or you're seeing something that I just simply don't, that's fine. You're totally allowed to think that, and I totally understand and totally think that you should be able to play the deck however you want. However, that is one thing that I just want to put out there and how I view this. Spider Shooter may only de-digivolve them by 1, but it does it for 3, so that at the very end, at least if I have my tamer on board, I'm at least able to make a follow-up play rather than just wrap up my turn right then and there. It just is, to me, something that is less risky to dork around with. However, that is totally up to you, and however you want to run it is fine. Do your thing. But that's it for the deck. This deck was very fun to use. I really do enjoy it. However, I don't think I'm going to be playing much black until that additional Machine Drum one comes out, because it's really the only reason why I wanted to play this. I'm not a big Greymon fan across the board, or Agumon fan line in any way, shape, or form across the board. But I do like Machine Drum. I think he's a pretty cool boy, and I wanted to build something just to get the use out of him in case I ever wanted to. And this deck turned into a very technical, very fun, slow and steady and be patient deck, and that is something that I like. I like slow and steady wins a race rather than rush to the finish line, and I got that out of this deck, so I really enjoyed it. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns about this deck profile, please let me know, and I will gladly have a little chat with you in the comments, and we'll talk all about it. I always love conversing with people that watch the videos, and it makes my day. If you liked the deck, please, by all means, feel free to subscribe. I've got plenty more coming out, plenty more deck profiles, and box openings when the content becomes available. I actually had a box that I bought a while ago, and this is before the prices got jacked to oblivion, and I was filming the deck profile, not deck profile, I was filming the box opening, and I was filling the awkward air through just kind of talking about life, and I was talking about my job and how I was getting really frustrated with it, and I got into this rant and then thought it would really suck if my job somehow found this. Not that they ever realistically could, but it always worried me because they do track our social media. So I was like, man, if they like secretly knew, I'll be in trouble. But after, it's been months at this point. But so I didn't upload that box opening. Probably wasn't a good idea. I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to be an angry person while opening up cards. But so I'll be doing more of those as time goes on. I'm really, really interested in Digimon. I think it's a pretty fun game, and I look forward to starting this new chapter with everybody. If you're hanging over from the Vanguard content, I do apologize. I don't think I'm going to be getting into Overdress. It doesn't look like anything I'm really that interested in, but that being said, please have a good night, day, wherever you are at. Please be safe. Stay indoors if you can help it. Wear a mask. Stay away from people. Be good. Behave. I will see you guys next time. Goodbye.